Dear Simon and the Collective, I feel it's time to get this terrible deed off my shoulders and confess to yourselves about a matter which occurred in the early 80s in Aberdeen. I worked at one of the local veterinary practices as a nurse, and one day old Mrs. Reed, one of our regular clients, came in with her ginger cat, Felix. Needless to say, he was not the nicest cat, and poor Mrs. Reed regularly came in with her arms, legs, and sometimes even her face scratched after Felix had decided to attack her for no apparent reason. After a lot of persuasion from ourselves, she finally agreed it was time to relieve Felix of some of his equipment to see if that would help his temperament.
Right, we're all there. Everyone's caught up now.
Yes.
Got it, yeah.
Because that might have helped.
Might help. We don't know.
Who knows? Once Mrs. Reed said his goodbyes to Felix, and Felix was about to say goodbye his equipment, we took him downstairs and gave him the anaesthetic, which was in itself not the easiest task, given his aforementioned temperament. Eventually we got him to sleep, and the vet quickly performed the operation before Felix was returned to his cage to recover. Now, it needs to be mentioned at this junction, it's common practice for us to leave the cage door ajar after an operation, the reason being it enabled us to intervene swiftly if the cat choked as they came round from the anaesthetic, which sometimes happened. However, Felix decided to come round a little bit quicker than most cats after his op, and was up and out of his cage before we knew what was happening. Double bad luck for us was the fact that the safety door at the top of the stairs was wedged ajar on account of it being a sunny day, and before we knew what was happening, Felix had managed to get himself past the first safety door and up the stairs. The last we saw of that darn cat, he was waddling along the back lane of the practice, and despite a number of us spending at least an hour hunting, Felix had disappeared and was nowhere to be found. It was at this point that panic started to set in, because despite his awful nature, we knew that Mrs. Reed loved Felix and would be lost without him. So what could we do?
I think we all know what's coming.
As we were trying to work out what to do next, one of the partners of the vet practice piped up that there were a couple of ginger cats at the local dog and cat home that he was involved with, and that he'd go and fetch them up for us. What a stroke of luck this was. After a short time, the partner returned, and amazingly, one of the cats had an incredible resemblance to Felix. You'd almost swear it was the same cat if it wasn't for the fact that this cat was unbelievably affectionate and intact. Yes, Father Simon, Felix Mark II had clearly never had the snip, which now posed us a moral dilemma. For all of 5 seconds, the vet swiftly did the deed, and our new Felix was now lighter of his equipment, even though he didn't need to have it.
No.
This time we watched like hawks as he recovered, and once we were happy with him, we summoned Mrs. Reed to collect her cat, in inverted commas. She arrived about 30 minutes later, and as she took the new Felix out of his cage, I could feel the sweat gathering on my brow and my upper lip as we anxiously watched to see the reaction. Well, unbelievably, Felix the fraud was soon purring. He couldn't believe his luck. I'm in here, and affectionately cuddled Mrs. Reed as if they'd known each other their whole lives. What a fraudster. And we could see our plan had actually unbelievably worked. Mrs. Reed was over the moon and thanked us profusely. I can't believe a simple operation could have had that effect so quickly, she said. And as she toddled out of the practice and into the awaiting taxi, she had a huge smile on her face. A few weeks later, Mrs. Reed actually phoned us to thank us for persuading her to go ahead with the operation, and that she couldn't be happier with her Felix. She actually said the words, and I quote, "He's just a totally different cat."
Yes, he is.
To which we wanted to say, "You've got that right, Mrs. Reed." So although we actually did Mrs. Reed a huge favour, I still feel bad about losing the original Felix and then castrating another cat just to cover up our crime. Therefore, I fall at your mercy to speak on behalf of the nation. Okay, so that's Therese and her confession from early 1980s Aberdeen veterinary practices. And I can see, because I suppose there's unethical behaviour in there, Bobby Pryor.
Yeah, and I just cannot see on what grounds I can forgive. Because the other thing that really confuses me is you know your animals these things that you have, these family members, even if they're in a bad mood and they're just suddenly in a good mood, I think she would know. I mean, I think it's the fact that she would want to believe. So she has some kind of, there's that kind of trick that you could go, well, this happened. So she has something to kind of qualify her doubt. She has something else that's happened to him, so he is a different cat. But it is a different cat. Also, you run
Everyone's
the
happy,
risk.
though.
Well, no, because Felix has gone missing and he's just had an operation.
Yeah, Felix
and
is horrible.
Well, no, he wasn't horrible. It's just, it's
was. He
different personality.
He scratched Mrs. Reed.
Well, maybe Mrs. Reed didn't hold him right. But the other thing is...
So it was her fault.
No, but what
This
is the
kind of thing
point
Matt
is-
would
but
say.
Here's the risk. The risk to raise is, of course, if Felix actually made it home. And then she'd have had 2 cats. I mean, maybe Felix found another place. I hope nothing happened to Felix. But I think, actually, I can't forgive you because I don't think this would happen. Different times, eh, Matt?
Well, yes. I think everyone's a winner here. I mean, false Felix gets a nice house. He's very happy. Mrs. Reed, she's over the moon. Can't believe her luck that one simple operation and you've turned a cat that was obviously not really suited to her into this fabulous cat. And we would surmise that probably Felix wandered out into the world and
Probably quite happy with his
very
his
happy
lot,
with life.
strutting
He decided,
around.
do you know what? Why am I so angry at the world all the time? Maybe I need to change my perspective. And
I think he got the stray cat strut.
And thankfully, I now have because of this incident involving the vet. So I am going to forgive because it all brought us all together and lessons for us all.